think that there's a certain amount of individual and collective guilt out there. So many people took part in this and have kept it quiet for so many years.
I never saw the baby, and none of us ever saw a dead baby at all, not at all. And that is why we think that baby may be living somewhere.
The ones that were far, well, severely handicapped were just, I think, just kind of disposed of.
The maternity home had a humble beginning in 1928. It was owned by William Young, a chiropractor and Seventh-day Adventist missionary, and his wife Lila, a midwife and teacher. They called their business the Ideal Home and Sanitarium. They took in unwed pregnant women and delivered their babies in secrecy. The home operated at a time when a woman, pregnant and not married, was a disgrace, a family embarrassment. Lila and William Young welcomed these women. They promised privacy and discretion. But that discretion had a price, $300 to $500, a small fortune in those days. Part of the deal was that the babies would be placed in affluent homes. The business looked legitimate. Its president, a senator, William Duff. In the home's brochure, the son and daughter-in-law of Nova Scotia's lieutenant governor proudly display their new son, a son they adopted from the maternity home. The Youngs helped out many young women in trouble, but the Ideal Home wasn't exactly a charity. What the women didn't know is that the Youngs were in the baby business and that the best of the babies were actually sold. In the 30s and 40s, wealthy couples flocked to Nova Scotia to buy healthy babies. Many stayed at the Casablanca guest home in East Chester.
We were from New York, New Jersey, and down Pittsburgh, Minnesota way. And then some of them came a few days before their child was born. They would come to the kitchen, they would tell me, and they'd throw their arms around my neck, and they all cried. This meant a great deal to them. And that evening, they would have a party.
People who worked at the maternity home say couples paid up to $5,000 for a healthy baby. But contracts between Lila Young and the mothers show that if a baby was not healthy, then it was considered a reject. If it wasn't white, or if it had birthmarks, deformities, or was crippled, then it would not be put up for adoption. The healthiest of these rejected babies were sometimes placed with Nova Scotia families. But the babies that were not wanted were neglected. They were simply not fed. When they died, they were placed in cheap wooden butter boxes and buried. They became known as the Butterbox babies.
The official story is...
Newspaperman Malcolm Phillips interviewed people who worked at the home.
The cute babies were very well taken care of. So to speak, they were marketable, and they presumably went to good homes. But it was the less than beautiful, or the, if you will, the culls of the crop, so to speak, that were disposed of in rather less than nice ways.
Maybe right here somewhere.
Glenn Shatford is 76. When he was in his early 20s, he worked as a handyman for Lila and William Young. He buried some of the babies.
I don't know. In there's all I know. In there, it's in back of the cemetery somewhere anyway.
Shatford says they were buried behind a Seventh-day Adventist cemetery. He's certain there are 75 to 100 babies buried here. He says he didn't know how they died.
I wish I could find the graves to show you. They're here somewhere. They're here somewhere. I wasn't the only one buried them. Murray Coon buried them. George Westaver buried them. Different ones buried them. And they buried themselves, I guess. Used to give them a little send-off. Used to say a little prayer.
There were no death certificates for the babies. They were buried in unconsecrated ground in unmarked graves. Shatford says there are at least 2 baby burial grounds. Hints of the scandal began to surface in the mid-1930s. The Youngs faced many civil and criminal charges. But in 1936, matters became serious. The charge was manslaughter. A 25-year-old woman died after being in the maternity home, but evidence against the Youngs was inconclusive. They were acquitted. Later, they were convicted for operating without government authorization. They paid $50 fines. In the summer of 1938, the Youngs faced fraud charges. Baby June Marion Macaulay was born in June of that year. She died a month later. In August, the Youngs wrote the father asking for money to keep the child at the home. The baby had been dead for a month. On baby June's death certificate, Lila Young listed herself as the undertaker and the attending physician, even though she was never a qualified doctor. Then in 1940, a 19-year-old married woman from Chester went to the maternity home. She thought Lila Young was a doctor who could deliver her baby. The woman, Violet Eisenhower, is now 69. She remembers the difficult delivery.
I didn't know it then, but I found out that she couldn't, you know, take care of me like a real doctor. And she got worried, and when I started having the baby, she got down by the bed and started praying and asking God to save my life. And she was very concerned, and that scared me. And then I told one of the girls, I said, call Dr. Sprigger in Chester for me and get him out here to help me, because I said, I'm going to die here. And the cord was around my baby's neck twice.
Violet Eisenhower made it through the difficult delivery. For 2 weeks, she nursed a healthy baby girl. Then, on the day she was to go home, the baby disappeared.
This was in the morning. She told me the baby died during the night. And I had seen the baby the night before, and it wasn't sick. It was in good health. I didn't see why it would die. I asked her, I said, what happened to it? Well, she said, sometimes the infants, they die. And she said, I think it took a fit. She said, that's what she said.
Lila Young charged the Eisenhowers $100 for a casket, but she refused to let anyone open it.
Yes, it was screwed down, like, and no way was she going to open it. And, of course, my father said, had he been in our own house, he would have made a real fuss about it and opened that box. But he was in another person's house, and he didn't want to cause any trouble. So the baby was buried without any of us seeing the dead baby or knowing what was in that box. And it was a Butterbox. I learned later when I went down there, because the girls told me that they helped Mrs. Young line the box with satin. And it looked good, so my mother-in-law said, but nobody knew what was in it when it came up. She didn't let anybody know what was in that box. And all these 48 years, I've been wondering, was my baby in that box? And if it was, why didn't she let us see it?
And if it wasn't?
And if it wasn't, it's somewhere out still living. She's still living. She's 48 years old. She was born in July the 7th in 1940. And I think maybe somewhere I've got a girl living. They certainly stole it and probably sold it. I don't know. I can't prove that.
In the mid-1940s, public pressure began to build again. In 1945, a New Jersey newspaper reported that U.S. officials were concerned. They had located at least 14 infants from a Nova Scotia baby farm. A year later, the maternity scam was reported nationally by novelist Mavis Gallant, then a Montreal journalist. Her report said as many as 890 girls had given up their babies to Lila and William Young. Soon after the Montreal Standard published its story, the Youngs sued for libel. A trial was held. The Youngs lost. They couldn't prove that accusations of baby peddling were not true. Today, court officials in Halifax say evidence from that trial was destroyed. They can't explain why. In the midst of all this, the Youngs kept their composure. They advertised around the world. Lovely babies for adoption, business as usual. They were so bold about selling their product that they placed a brass baby on a globe and perched it on top of the maternity home overlooking all of Chester. Locally, the Youngs remained highly respected. People still remember them.
About the home, I really didn't know much about it, but I knew Mrs. Young, Dr. Young. She was a very nice woman, very nice and pleasant.
But government scrutiny intensified. In 1945, the province ordered that all deaths at the maternity home be investigated by the RCMP before burial certificates could be issued. By the summer of '46, provincial officials had enough. They ordered the home closed. The province's director of child welfare announced that the peddling of illegitimate children in Nova Scotia is finally over. William Young later moved away from Nova Scotia and has not been heard from since. Lila Young died in 1969. She was 70. She's buried in Fox Point, only a stone's throw from where the Butterbox babies are buried in their unmarked graves. Now, Nova Scotia's chief medical officer is interested in the story.
Since it happened so many years ago, if in fact there was any, crime involved, I doubt whether anything could be done about that now, but it's such a fascinating story that I think on that basis it would be interesting to follow it up.
But others are more than curious. They want a full investigation. Marion Oakley was born at the baby factory in the late 30s. She was adopted by a Halifax couple. She has no birth certificate or any legal adoption papers.
Could never get any information on it. And then when I tried to get my birth certificate, when I wanted to get my driver's license, there was no record of me, none whatsoever. And that gave me reason to really start to worry. It worried me, you know. I thought, why isn't there a record of me? There should be if it was a legal adoption.
The information won't be easy to find. The Youngs didn't keep records. All the mothers were given false names. This means maybe 1,000 or more Nova Scotia women will never know if their babies were placed in good homes or if they became anonymous victims, the Butterbox babies. Bette Cahill, CBC News, Chester, Nova Scotia.